Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the earnings conference call of ICICI Securities Limited for the quarter ended June 30, 2020. We have with us on the call Mr. Vijay Chandok, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Ajay Saraf, Executive Director, Mr. Harvinder Jaspal, Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Yagnesh Parekh, Chief Digital and Technology Officer, Mr. Vijay Gulecha, Head Retail Equities, Mr. Kedar Deshpande, Head Retail Distributions, Product and Service Group, and Mr. Anupam Guha, Head Private Wealth and Equity Advisory Group. For the duration of this presentation, all participant lines will be in the listen-only mode. I will be standing by for the Q&A session. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Vijay Chandok to take the proceedings. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you and welcome to the ICICI Securities first quarter earning call for fiscal 2021. I trust that all of you, your families, your near and dear ones are safe and healthy, and I do hope it remains that way. Well, as the world deals with one of the most unprecedented events in modern history, with wide-reaching ramifications across the globe to people, to economies, to business environment, and even business models, we strongly feel there is a need to stay agile, nimble, and vigilant on many fronts. India has seen one of the latest lockdown regimes, which has perhaps helped the medical infrastructure in the country to catch up with the scale that is required to deal with this pandemic. However, all this has happened not without wide economic repercussions. So in this context, we felt it was imperative to look at the emerging market environment and some of the key developments that took place in our operating environment during this quarter which just concluded. So when we look at markets, which directly impacts to a very large extent our company, the markets rebounded from March lows, but clearly is still below the pre-COVID levels. And we saw global indices rebounding sharply in the quarter. This is after a massive fall that we saw in the month of March last quarter. And all this is happening despite economic concerns as well as rising COVID-19 cases. All global banks, the central banks I'm referring to, response to the crisis has been coordinated, has been swift in terms of rate cut and providing liquidity. And we feel this is what has probably helped, partially at least, fueling the global rally in the equity market. Closer home, the quarter witnessed a gradual reopening of the nationwide lockdown, starting from June 8th, after 4 phases of lockdown that we experienced for most part of the quarter. Despite weaknesses getting reported on macroeconomic front, the Indian headline indices posted their best ever quarterly return since 2009. Gaining almost 20% in the quarter and recouping 35% of the March 2020 lows. The rise in the Indian equity markets was broader and across market caps, with even the small caps rising by about 30% during the quarter. What is also unique during this period that we saw is the rising retail participation in the market. So globally, retail participation in equity markets increased dramatically during this quarter, and in line with the same trend, India also, we saw the level of retail participation hitting some record highs. What we actually saw was a strong growth in active clients, and this happened with many inactive customers entering the market, as well as a sharp rise in number of newcomers into the market. We believe that this trend is getting fueled by availability of a completely digital, no-touch format of method of engagement, which is offered by large technology-based players. It's also fueled by the fact that work from home environment is providing additional time to investors, as well as the increase in disposable income, which is caused by the reduction in discretionary spending. And this increased disposable income is being done for the purpose of investment and saving. We also believe that the relative attractiveness of the equities, particularly during the early phase of this quarter, which was where it was trading at multi-year low valuation, also accentuated this trend of retail investors participating in large numbers in the market. We believe that although some part of this retail participation seen in the current quarter may moderate in the coming quarters, there is clearly a structural shift by customers preferring to deal in an online and a remote format offered by digitally led intermediaries rather than a physical format. And this trend is visible not just amongst the youngsters and the younger investors, but is also spreading very rapidly and getting embraced very rapidly by mature investors. This quarter also witnessed certain regulatory changes. And if you go behind the skin of these regulatory changes, these are all aimed at providing operational convenience to retail investors, as well as there have been a slew of reforms to protect the long-term interest of these retail investors. So in this context, the Securities Exchange Board of India issued simplified guidelines for digital onboarding and KYC of customers. This helped these retail investors open accounts without any physical intervention or any kind of a physical paperwork flow. Regulators have also given certain timeline extensions to market participants in light of the COVID-19 situation, which is helping us to manage in difficult times. Recently, certain regulatory changes have been issued with respect to collection of margin upfront in the cash, equities and F&O segment. There have also been certain changes in margin requirements for these segments. Further, SEBI has issued certain guidelines regarding the method of margin finance with regards to pledge and repledging of securities. In the distribution business, SEBI has issued norms of segregating distribution and advisory customers. When you again look at all these regulations, our strong view is that these regulatory changes augur well for the orderly growth of the industry in the longer term. However, there is likely to be some short-term transition challenges and impact in the industry. Given this context, let me now take you through some of the key aspects of the quarter with respect to our company. So being classified as an essential services company, we ensured that we remained accessible to our customers and open for business at all times during the lockdown phase. During this period, we focused on ensuring health and safety of our employees and also followed a prudent risk management approach for our customers as well as for the company, particularly in the context of the massive volatility that we saw during this period. We have also been focusing simultaneously on identifying avenues to digitize all the non-digital parts of business during this period that we could lay our hands on. And this is work in process as we move forward. Our resilient business model, along with our digital platform, has kept us in good stead in the business environment that has emerged. We continue to focus on the input parameters by working on our stated strategic priorities. And strategic priorities we've been outlining and reiterating every quarter in our quarterly earnings call with the intent to diversify and granularize our business model. And I'm very happy to report to you that we are making good progress on all fronts. In this context, during this quarter, we launched what is called as the ICICI Direct Insta account, our open architecture end-to-end digital account acquisition using the EDIS process or the electronic delivery instruction slip process. Through this channel, we have already opened over 20,000 customer accounts, and this channel, after facing some initial teething hiccups, is stabilizing, continues to stabilize well. Now this channel is also being used to fulfill the account opening process for customers which are acquired through ICICI Bank, our business partner network, and also our own RM and brand channel network. So as a consequence of now of completely digitizing account opening process and becoming open architecture, and also by ramping up our business partner network, we have been able to surpass our last year's monthly average run rate of account opening in the month of June, despite the fact that we've had lockdown, despite the fact that the digital process that is operational is still in the nascent stage and evolving, and is also in the process of being spruced up. We have also, as a consequence of this, been able to diversify our client sourcing channel mix with the largest sourcing channel partner, which is ICICI Bank, now contributing approximately about 65% of the total customers that we source, as compared to 80% that this channel was actually contributing in the last fiscal. In the equities business, we witnessed an increase of about 90% year on year in terms of the average number of customers trading with us on a daily basis. Our ADTOs, or the average daily turnover, across equities and derivatives grew faster than the market, aided by our propositions like Prime, Prepaid, and the Options 20 pricing plan, all of which are gaining traction. As a result, this helped us grow our market share by about 260 basis points and 150 basis points in equities and derivatives markets respectively. We have also been able to scale back our ESOP and MTF book to approximately 15 billion rupees as at June 30th, 2020, up from about 5.8 billion rupees as at March 31st, 2020. You may recollect that we had proactively scaled down this business owing to the heightened market volatility in the last quarter and our risk assessment during that period. As a result of our initiatives on improving value of client sourcing, as well as engaging existing clients with better experiences and superior propositions, our NSE active customer base grew by 27% YOY and stood at approximately at 1.1 million as at June 30th, and our total active client base stood at about 1.5 million, which is a growth of about 15%. Coming to our distribution business, here we face some headwinds. This is due to lower asset values, as well as the fact that our contact-based products were clearly impacted as a consequence of the lockdown. In this area of distribution, while our gross flows in mutual funds grew slightly ahead of market, we witnessed redemption in the debt fund, bringing down our total net flows in the mutual fund business. On the other hand, our equities mutual fund net flows and our market share increased year on year. We also saw good traction in the fixed income business during this quarter. Our wealth management business also got impacted by constraints arising from COVID. However, despite this, it registered a 36% growth on back of the equity franchise and digitally available products, primarily fixed income products which registered good growth. Also during this quarter, we added about 1,600 new customers to this segment. The assets of our clients in the wealth management business increased by about 1% on sequential quarters to about 1 trillion rupees. We also saw improvement in yield All this is detailed in the presentation. As a result of all these developments and progress made, our Q1 FY20 revenues stood at rupees 5,464 million, a growth of 36%, and profit after tax stood at 1,931 million, a growth of 70% year-on-year. We recognize that a sustainable business is one which is sensitive to the needs of its wider universe of stakeholders, including shareholders, customers, partners, community, and also its impact on environment. With this thought in mind, we have adopted an ESG policy to formalize our commitment towards conducting our business responsibly, to make a difference to the communities and our planet, as well as making a positive impact within our market. We are in the process, therefore, of releasing our maiden ESG report shortly. Further, being an asset-light company that generates high operating cash flows, the board in our meeting today was pleased to revise our dividend distribution policy with an endeavor to have a dividend payout of at least 50% of profits after tax every financial year, subject of course to parameters and criteria which is laid out very clearly in our policy. We have also worked towards contributing to the ongoing efforts of various agencies fighting the COVID pandemic, including working with IIT Kanpur for development of ventilators, providing PPE material to police force in Maharashtra, and contributing quite generously to the PM CARES fund for the COVID-19 pandemic. This, of course, is all apart from the usual CSR work that we do through our foundation. Going forward, we recognize that the future is fraught with uncertainty. The recent market disruption has reaffirmed that our strategy of providing comprehensive life stage-based financial services to retail Indian investors, powered digitally, we believe this strategy becomes all the more relevant than ever before in the current context. So while we continue to focus on the strategy, we want to reiterate 4 areas which will get special attention in the current situation and in the current year. First, a rapid increase in digitization at all levels within the organization. I think this is going to get center stage and prominent investment of time and energy and effort and people. Second, higher focus on increasing cost efficiencies in times of uncertainty, increasing your attention and putting your spotlight on cost clearly is an item of importance, and we are giving it its due. Third, using this opportunity to invest in technology for upgrading our infrastructure and capacity. And fourth and lastly, using this opportunity to fortify our talent pool to position us well for the future. Our detailed performance has been circulated through our presentation and uploaded on our website. I would like to end our opening comments and throw open the call to any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for a patient hearing, and now we are open for any questions that you may have from your end.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question-answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on the touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handset while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. We take the first question from the line of Srinivasan Ramachandran from Spark Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot for taking my question. Just wanted to get your sense on the two regulations that you talked about. One was the net margining requirement that went live from June first week, and also the notification that we put out a couple of days back on the intraday funding for cash and F&O. Wanted to get your sense. Obviously, the second regulation is still not gone live. It's another 4-5 months to go. Wanted to get a sense as to how things will shape up if that regulation, especially the funding one, goes live on an as various basis.
Yeah, I'm going to request Vishal, Head of Equities, to step in and address that.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the question. So this regulation, if you, carefully see, this is in two parts. One is the collection of margin for the cash positions, and secondly, the peak margin collection for the intraday product. So as far as the cash market is concerned, I believe market is largely compliant, and I have a reasonable reason to believe that with the advent of the internet-based and the technology-based platform, the advanced collection of margin in cash trade has become very, very prominent for a number of years. The another part is which is the intraday, the collection of market or margin, and some kind of regularization on the trading products. I think this will have some impact on market. Still, this is very nascent circular released just the day before, and that also is going to be implemented in 4 phases. And as we stand, there are different kind of products intraday. We have in cash, we have in F&O, and different kind of products have different kind of margining system. And complete evaluation, it may take some time, but intraday is a prominent part of the entire industry, and it is likely to have some impact on market as far as short term is concerned. I think in long term, again, whatever is good for investors and traders will prevail, and that's what our assessment at this point of time is.
Okay. Just to extend that question a bit more, in terms of don't share this information if it's competitive in nature. Within your clientele, is there any sense you have what proportion of especially derivative volumes come from the intraday facilities that you provide to their clients? Any sense you could give us?
So I'll repeat. We have not disclosed the composition of the total equity or the derivatives volume.
Okay, fair enough.
That is not part of the disclosure as of now. Yeah.
Sure. Fine, please. Second was on the net margining that we saw in June month, effective going June 1st. Just wanted to get your sense within your clientele. Again, is that has resulted in higher volume because we saw the benefit of it only for 1 month? Do you see, was there a noted increase in volumes because that allows covered products to be operated at much lower margining requirements, which allows the same margin to go to a much higher traded volume, especially if you're doing covered products? Want to get a sense what was the experience within your clientele. We've seen 20 days of June also. Any that spike in volume that we've seen, is that something which you can be extrapolated to some extent?
Yeah, so I believe you are talking about the new framework about the derivatives, the margining, where exposure margin, etc., was taken within span, and the covered positions and the hedge positions got certain benefit. So of course, people who are taking this kind of position have seen some benefit. But having said that, I would also say that market largely goes a directional basis, and there the benefit is not much. So whoever is in strategy kind of thing, of course the benefit is very much there for them. But whoever is more directional and singular kind of a position, there the impact is hardly anything.
Sure. I'll come back later. Thank you.
So if you look at markets have not given that kind of reaction. If you look at the market volumes on derivatives, I think you'll get your answer there.
Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Kashyap Zaveri from SK.
Can we just request people who are not speaking to be on mute? There is a lot of disturbance which is making it difficult for us to hear you on the phone. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and congratulations for the set of numbers. I have just one question, which is on your retail brokerage. If I look at your average revenue per client, so I'm just doing retail brokerage divided by number of active NSE clients. Over the last 2 quarters, that has moved up from 11,400 to almost about 13,000 now versus about 9,500 for probably last 4-5 quarters. As we understand also from the position in the market, there is significant increase in retail participation during last couple of months versus the institutional side. So in that sense, how do you see this 11,500 to 13,000 odd rupees per client increase on annualized basis? Is it sustainable? Do you believe that in terms of the type of clients that you have onboarded, this kind of revenue per client is sustainable?
Yeah, so this is Sanjay here. First of all, what you are saying is absolutely right, that in this period, we have seen a mix of the investors or what you mentioned as retail delivery volume, that going up, and that has been the trend in the market as well. Obviously, with that, the average revenue goes up, but it may not be sustainable because this mix is also, as Vijay mentioned in his opening comment, from episode of volatility, multi-year lows, and a higher retail participation that is happening. What I think we are trying to do is to increase the number of clients that we engage in order to granularize our revenue stream. We have launched propositions like Prime and Prepaid, which offer a full value pack to customers. On the back of that, we've been able to increase the total number of revenue-generating clients in our equity business. Strong growth has been registered over there. So we are focusing in a direction of creating a more diversified, a more granular revenue stream. So obviously Prime comes at a lower yield if you look at yield as a metric, but we are more focused on having a larger number of revenue-generating customers with a more sustainable revenue stream. So, that's a slightly longish answer to your question.
Oh, right. So if I understood correctly, what you're targeting is that, out of the client base of 4.86, whereas overall active clients is about 1.51 and NSE active clients are 1.12, you would try to, sort of target that number of 1.12 and 1.51 as we go forward.
So actually, if I can come in, Vijay here, see the way we don't want to become a slave to a product and yield. It's a very limiting and I would say a narrow way of looking at it because customer doesn't think of me as just providing you one item. Our thinking is customer centric and give him a great service so that you can take him through his life stage. We have been able to demonstrate it because we have customers who actually onboarded us way back 20 years in the past. They still do business with us. 37% of our customers, which are 15-year-old stock, they still deal with us. So you can imagine that during this whole journey, his needs have evolved over levels of sophistication and also across different categories of financial requirements. Idea is to monetize life stage value rather than just looking at it, equity product yield in a very narrow sense. So we are more interested in growing aggregate revenue, keeping customers with us and making him providing the right kind of solution and growing aggregate revenue at a customer level across products.
So, but if I look at that, then there is a fourth chart in the same slide, slide number 14, where clients with more than two products or two or more products are like 0.95 million, which is like not too far away from 1.5 million active client number also. We are almost like 2/3 there. So then how do you, on an overall client basis, then how do you, improve the, yield? Whereas, almost 2/3 of our clients are already like for two or more products.
Yeah. So let me answer that. So you have to look at it from two perspectives. One is, if you look at our 1.5 million ever all product active customer base, that has grown at a 15% on a YOY basis. So as you rightly said, one endeavor is to increase the 1.5 million, and that is where our third lever of strategy to engage clients in a digital manner, offering better experiences, and a very personalized, hyper-personalized experience. We call it an N=1 strategy. So those are the initiatives to enhance the 1.5 million. So once that starts happening, our monetization, which is the second lever of our strategy to enhance the wallet share. So if a person has a direct equity kind of a relationship with us, can he do a managed equity? Can he do a PMS if he migrates to a wealth? And so on and so forth. So how do you get more and more relationships with a customer? So clients with two or more products is deepening that relationship. So one is you expand the horizon. You try to get 1.5 million customers up from 1 million customers. And then within that, you try to cross-sell, try to expand the product portfolio with the customer. So both these directions we are making progress, and there are a lot of products a lot of initiatives which are lined up. We are offering more product lines. We are offering newer manner of engagement to the customer. So exactly that is the direction what you're saying.
Okay. And just one last question, if I can squeeze in. In terms of non-mutual fund distribution, that number is largely driven or largely an outcome of what's been happening on the loan origination side for the whole sector, right? I mean, it's just that the volumes are low. So
no, so that loan origination also is a part of that, but it is a very spread out book. So you have a very wide array of products. It starts with insurance products, protection products. It starts with loans products. We have fixed income products sitting in that kitty. We have PMS products over there. NPS is over there. So we have a long area of the products which are sitting over there. So for instance, in this quarter, fixed income did very well in that. But obviously, as Vijay mentioned in his opening remarks, insurance as well as contact dependent products, we had some challenges.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. That's it from my side. And best of luck for the future.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Utsav Gogirwar from Investor Capital. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity, sir, and congratulations on great set of numbers. For our first question is with respect to the clients. So if you look at the last 3 months trend, it's clearly visible that the top 3 discount brokers have significantly gained market share on an incremental basis. And we have some challenges on because of some of the reasons you already mentioned. But how do you see the growth in the coming quarters, where now we have open architecture? There are some teething issues which are over now. So how do you see this trend in the coming quarters? That is my first question, sir.
Yeah. So Vishal here. So beginning of the quarter, we had some challenges in terms of account opening and the complete non-availability of completely digitized process. So that process was started somewhere in the month of April, and it got stabilized towards the end of April. So we feel that one hurdle is at least off our back now. And now, we remain committed, to the segment which is mass affluent. We are looking for a very profitable growth kind of a strategy. And also at the same time with the open architecture and, adding partners, I feel that the scaling up is a way forward. But at the same time, as I said, that our commitment is very much, to have a very, very profitable growth. So all process-related things plus open architecture, adding new partners, I think these are the things. And as far as ICICI Bank is concerned, our engagement remains very, very robust. So these are the 4 things which I, look forward to in creating the scale as we move forward.
So I'll just supplement what Vishal is saying. I would concur with what your observations are. And you have to view our quarter in the context of the fact that actually 1 month of the quarter virtually was not there for business because of the simply non-availability of a digital process which was actually working fine. It, as Vishal explained, got stable towards the end of the month. But more importantly, I think whatever is needed to ensure that we continue our growth momentum in terms of proposition, in terms of experiences, we are vigilant and we will be agile. We will maneuver ourselves. We will just need to study whether the new client has got meat or it is fluff, and take our calls accordingly. I just want to assure you that we are not going to let this lie down. We will be looking at all options, which are technology options, plan options, and so on, so that we remain cutting edge there.
Sure, thanks. The second question is with respect to the cost to income ratio. That has significantly improved this quarter, and but if I look at the employee expenses, there is a pretty steep growth. So is there any one-off in this quarter employee expenses, and how do you look at the cost to income ratio for the full year?
Yeah, so actually there is a fair element of variabilized employee cost, which you are seeing. There is a fixed employee cost which is flat, and there is a variable employee cost which has gone up. It is purely a function of the company's performance. So if the company's performance warrants that variable cost to be there, it will be there. If it doesn't warrant, it will not be there. That's how we are looking at it. So we request you to look at it in that context. Cost is an important focus. We'll be not taking our eyes off that. And you have seen a movement there. We have continued to look at various ways of bringing efficiencies. There are many thoughts which are WIP as we speak. Apart from that, you also need to know, when you look at our overall operating costs, there is a front loading of some costs. For instance, given the pandemic, we decided that we will front load our expenses towards the CSR spend. So we actually almost finished most part of our annual spend, which typically happens through the course of the year or towards the last part of the year. Actually, almost done with our full year agenda in the first quarter. So there is a big front loading there as well.
Sure. So just one follow-up on that. So when you mentioned that the variable cost will move with the business, what is the driver behind it? Is it the ADTO or market share which we are gaining, or how should I look at that?
So that is the board sets the sort of agenda for us in terms of what they want to see, and largely they will want to see similar stuff as what the investors would want to see. So if they feel that this is appropriate in line with whatever is the sort of set target for us and set outcomes for us, they will permit that kind of a variable spend. Otherwise, it will be curtailed. We, for instance, did that last year. Despite whatever we did last year, the senior team actually took a salary cut. And there was a very small payout of bonus compared to what the incentive that was what they were eligible for. So that's an agenda, that is a board agenda, and they will deal with it. That is the way we do it.
And Utsav, it is also to be seen in context of a lower base, as Vijay just mentioned, that given whatever overall environment, etc., for last year. So from there, the variable cost also needs to be seen against that base of last year.
Yeah, you should just think about the long-term guidance that we've given. We've given you some long-term guidance. We will be moving in that path.
Yeah.
Excellent, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Madhukar Ladha from HDFC Securities. Please go ahead.
Hi everyone. Thank you for taking my question, and congratulations on a great set of numbers. First, just a small bookkeeping question. The NPF and ESOP book has grown to about 15 billion. Can you give a breakup, and what is your average lending rate? And I believe this is period end book, so can you give us a number for the average book for the quarter?
Yeah. So, Madhukar, breakup we have not put out, but yeah, it is our exit book. The lending rate we borrow at commercial paper. So for the quarter under question, it was roughly about 5.5%. Progressively it has come down, or it is coming down with the RBI rates, etc., moving slightly downwards. Average yield, as we have said earlier also, is in the range of about 4 to 5% on this book currently. About 4 to 5% is the average NIM.
Average NIM, okay.
NIM, yeah. And yeah, you also asked the average book. So
book size, yeah, if that is possible.
So average book was roughly about 8.5. Because we started with 5.8 billion as of 1st of April, right. And we reached about 15 billion. So average for the quarter was roughly about 8 now.
Right. I wanted to circle back on the first question on the new margining framework for derivatives. Can you give us some sort of proportion of the F&O volumes that you do? So I know that you don't declare the breakup of the ADTV, but whatever the F&O volumes we do, what proportion of it would be the high leverage sort of customers doing that?
So, Madhukar, our ADTO breakup, as we have said earlier also, is not very different from the market mix. And we do declare that. If you look at our appendix on slide 33, so we have the market ADTO volume and the derivative market share and derivative ADTO volume as well. It is roughly similar to the market mix of about 97 odd % of the overall ADTO comprises F&O.
Right. Okay. So then, what part of that ADTO could get impacted, or let's not use the word impacted, but what share would be coming from high intraday leverage trades?
Madhukar, that we have not put out as yet. As Vishal also tried to explain, it is two newer development right now. We are looking at all possible options. But that portion we have not particularly put out. But derivative at an overall level is similar to what the market is. And this circular, as Vijay also mentioned in the opening remarks, also is an industry level intraday volume circular. So the impact or movement, etc., is expected to be across the industry. So we'll work on our various levers available to kind of arrive at our way forward.
Understood. The investment banking revenues have done well. And what would be the principal drivers of that? I thought that the lockdown would have impacted it, but it's actually, you've done 22 crores of that.
So, yeah, the lot of secondary, block trades or either QIP for JM Financial. So a lot of all these transactions picked up in June. And we are seeing the similar trend for the current quarter.
So Madhukar, just to supplement what Ajay said, one of our components of our corporate side of strategy is actually to bring as much predictability and repeat value. And so the team has been actually focusing on flow business on the institutional side. They've been focusing on certain categories of market issuances like QIPs, etc., which tend to be far more regular and not as episodic as IPOs, so that we are able to diversify and granularize our stuff there as well. So I think some impact of that is visible to our numbers this quarter.
Got it. And just on the employee expenses, can you spell out, because the employee headcount has come down significantly, but the expenses have moved up. I understand that you are providing for some variable. So what's the baseline fixed cost, for, let's say, this quarter, just so that we can model this number more accurately?
So, Madhukar, overall, our fixed to variable ratio ranges from about 70-30. It's around in that range, the fixed to variable expense. And as you rightly said, the fixed cost on the back of all the employee count, etc., going down. So fixed element of the employee cost has gone down by 3%. The variable is what has increased in line with the top line and our various other parameters that we generally measure.
Understood. And last, the operating expenses also declined, significantly. So any particular reason for that?
So operating expenses, if you're looking at sequential quarter, they have declined. You're looking at sequential, right? Not the YY.
Sequential and year-over-year, both ways it's gone down. So year-over-year it's down about 24% and QOQ 30%, right?
Yeah. So two things have happened over there. One is that on a sequential basis, there was a provision that we had taken, a one-time provision on account of COVID, about 9 crores. So that is obviously non-recurring, and therefore that is the reason for the sequential decline. On a YOY basis, some of our transaction charges we have been able to renegotiate, and those are yielding us some benefit. Also, going forward, we have now launched the fully end-to-end digital process, which relies on e-franking, or it does not require power of attorney. And therefore, some of the franking charges have also come down. So these are primarily two aspects which are driving operating expenses slightly downwards.
That's it from me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Dipen Mehta, individual investor. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for taking my call. So my question is that what is the average onboarding time for retail investor client?
Yeah. So average, the completely digitized process which we had spoken about, this is absolutely online, and it takes about 4 to 5 hours time before customer can place his first order. So it is not more than that. So it all depends.
Okay.
If you are at, say, if you open an account at 2 o'clock during the day, then perhaps the next order placement will be possible on the next day morning. But as far as process is concerned, it is completely digitized, and if you open at the early hours in the day, then the same day your account will be activated.
Okay, so after 4 to 5 hours, the individual can trade from his account. Is it so, or?
Very much.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Manish Oswal from Nirmal Bang Securities. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a question on your quarterly management commentary. We said that we will be soon adding the option of investing in US security on the ICICI Direct platform. So my question is, what is the size of this opportunity in the marketplace? And I mean, in recent time when we show very sharp movement of technology stock prices in the US. So there must be some diversification from the high-end investors in India. So what are the feedback you are having on that sector? Thank you.
Thanks. Let me come in. I think this is a relatively new, I would say, arena in many ways for the industry. The way we look at it is that the total outbound investment from India, broadly, last year, if you look at the numbers, it has been in the ballpark of about $15 billion. And when you go into and dissect this 15 billion, you will find that only about ₹500 million is going into financial investment, and everything else, so that means 14.5 billion dollars is going into non-financial areas. So presumably into real estate, presumably into meeting certain kinds of expenses, education expenses, living expenses, etc., of people who send their children outside India, etc. So, but a sizable amount of it is also perhaps going into real estate. So, and this number has in the past at least been growing at about 40% CAGR. Now we don't know whether in the current context, there is going to be change in that ratio, that growth rate, or whether it will come down. We don't know. But given the fact that $15 billion is already flowing out, we could feel a very nascent, untapped opportunity to actually not just sort of gain market share from increasing remittance outside India, but also gain market share from taking a larger slice of the money which is anyway going. So maybe some amount that is going into non-financial assets can get into financial assets. That was the thinking with which we are looking to introduce this. Today, is it possible? Yes, it is possible even today. But the procedures and processes are so physically draining that that itself puts a big speed breaker to the flow of money. So we have been working very closely with our bank partners, and we are uniquely positioned because through ICICI Bank we have a product called Money to World. So one of the features of that Money to World product is that you can seamlessly send money out of the country. And one of the biggest hurdles in investing outside is lots of paperwork and controls around that remittance. That remittance bank has digitized, and it is the only bank in the country which has been able to give a solution like that. So that's why we felt that an online solution integrated with a payment interface, which all will work seamlessly for the investor, will actually give a real first-time opportunity where he can invest into global investor in markets just like he invests in the Indian market. Nearly it will be similar experience. So hopefully if that experience is available, given the sort of returns that the overseas equities has given, also his intent to diversify, and also his intent to create probably dollar asset for long-term uses, is something that we felt could be an opportunity for the Indian investors. So with that thinking, we are looking to actually grow. We do hope that in the more medium term, this will become an interesting story for the company.
Okay, and apart from providing the platform, what is the value proposition for the customer of ICICI Securities? For example, if somebody having a portfolio of 5 crores and he wants to put $2 lakh in US equities, so what is the value proposition ICICI Securities providing to that particular customer?
So the biggest value proposition is that you have direct access to debt and equity markets in US. Number one, you can see the prices, you can decide, you can actually execute an order on the platform. And not just that, you are able to also transfer your money from your account without having to go step out of your house and go to the bank branch and fill up forms and do that, which is required today. If you were to do it, the process of sending money out has got a physical leg. Let me put it like that. That physical leg is completely replaced by a digital process. So it becomes very convenient to invest. So that is the value proposition that we are looking for.
Thank you. Before we take the next question, a reminder to the participants, please limit your question to 2 per participant only. Next question is from the line of Aditya Jain from Citigroup. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of small clarifications. On the MTF plus ESOP book, which is around 15 billion, has recovered quite well. How large do we plan to make this?
Yeah.
So, Aditya, the two books have different drivers. MTF is obviously related to the larger sentiment that we have. And just to give you a sense, I mean, we have sufficient headroom. You know that by regulation it could be 5 times the net worth. And we have very stringent internal risk parameters, etc. Which
yeah. So Aditya, if I can just supplement this, we don't look at any specific product in a very and put a target on yourself on that, particularly on credit side. Clearly, why are we doing this business? We are very clear. We are doing this business because MTF helps equities, the core equity business. That's why we are doing it. And why are we doing ESOP business? Because it helps our wealth business. So if these two objectives are getting met, we will keep on adding. Right? The idea is not to create an MTF book in isolation of itself, irrespective of what it does to. So we are also careful that we want to give it only to those customers who are actively doing equities business with us. And ESOP persons as a model of acquiring the high value and quality wealth customers. We feel that the opportunity is large and enormous. Also, we have to keep in mind that MTF kind of a product is not necessarily a secular product. It is a product which is very much driven by the way markets are moving. You know, when there is a anticipation and hope of markets going up, there is a demand and requirement of an MTF kind of a product. On the other hand, when the market is actually drifting and going southwards, we would definitely not, unnecessarily want to encourage our customers to take it, because, it would land up him bearing an interest cost and not getting returns on equity, which is not the right way of sustaining any business. So rather than looking at it with targets and, making a, a mistake and leading up to challenges with customer experiences, we would rather use this as an allied opportunity for our equities business and allied opportunity for mutual fund, for wealth business. In terms of limits, yes, we have limits which are much larger than what we have played out so far. Is there an opportunity outside? I think the opportunity is many times the size of our company, if you ask me. It's a very large opportunity in a sense. So we will, try to play the opportunity based at the timing, keeping in view the timing as well as meeting this objective. So you could possibly see this MTF book growing up, or you could even see it shrinking back, like we saw last year.
Understood, yeah. So I understand. So MTF is more cyclical, ESOP also some element of cyclicality, but probably less than MTF. On the activation rate, so the movement from 68% to 58%, is it just normal volatility, or is it a function of the change in channel mix, or is there something else happening?
So, as we said at beginning last year, I mean, the focus was entirely on having a very, very profitable customer and a right set of customers. So this is, combination of two, acquiring right, and second, the intensity which we created around, getting the customer active as soon as they are on board. So this is, the trend which you would have observed in last quarter also, and this continued in this quarter as well.
Okay, I thought activation rate is slightly down, right? So my question was, it's been pretty high.
Of the channel mix, you're right.
Okay, got it. So there's a mention of 36% ROE growth. sorry, just last question. So what is the rupee number for ARPU, just so that we can compare with the calculation, how we can do it?
Sorry, Aditya, could you just repeat that? You wanted
the rupee ARPU. There is a mention of a 36% ARPU growth. What is the rupee ARPU in the quarter?
Just give me a minute. So, Aditya, let me just come back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Mohit Surana from CLSA. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, sir, and congratulations on the great set of numbers. I had two questions on the open architecture product that we have now rolled out. So, as far as I understand, we had a strategy that we wanted to increase the activation rate among the existing clients, and even in the operational clients, we wanted to increase the yields and cross-sell, etc. So now, given that you are embarking on an open architecture kind of a product, is there some kind of a change in strategy to grow overall clients instead of increasing the activation among clients?
No.
And second question is, which are the banks that we are partnering with in this kind of an open architecture, and how is the revenue share agreement different from what we have with the ICICI Bank? Thank you.
Yeah. No. Just to comment, Vijay, here, that there is no change in strategy at all. In fact, the idea of having open architecture is to acquire customers in a digital, without necessarily having a bank partnership. So if we see a slight decline in activation for this quarter, it is not because of any other reason, but because of the change in channel mix. So different channels. So we have now 4 channels. Earlier we had virtually one channel dominating our business, which is the bank customer. So most of the activation rates we saw was only ICICI Bank customer activation rate. Now ICICI Bank customer activation, so what you are seeing is a mix between our partners, digital, as well as our own network, which is expanded. And because all these three are relatively, young and nascent, you need little bit of time for the activation rates to catch up. I can see the activation rates internally increasing week on week. So certainly no departure from any strategy of working on activation rates. That's point number 1. Point number 2, an open architecture does not warrant us to have any formal partnership with anybody. So all it requires is a customer to come in and state his bank account, and we just link that account, whichever account it may be. It could be State Bank of India, it could be HDFC Bank, or any other bank anywhere in the country. And there is no revenue sharing arrangement at all with them. Everything that comes to that customer goes 100% to ICICI. In terms of which banks, it just so happens that since SBI is the largest bank, most of the customers are there. And also we find that HDFC is another big contributor to us. So these are the two big banks, two big contributors.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Harish Kapoor from IIFL Asset Management. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. A couple of questions now. We had made some one-off provision last quarter around 9-10 crores for the margin funding or any other impact that we were going to expect. So has that been utilized? Is it still sitting in the balance sheet, or how is that? Second, if you can just talk through in terms of the employee cost, a lot of discussion there. But if I just look at the broad numbers in terms of how the trend in the revenue and the expenses shaped up. So quarter on quarter, the expenses are up 24% on the employee side. but the employee cost is up 24%, but the revenue is up 13% Q-on-Q. So, I believe you kind of mentioned it's the board policy, etc., but I would still think that it's linked to, the revenue traction. So if you can just throw some color there, and, is this employee cost just for the revenue that has come through for this quarter, and we'll see a similar trend if there is revenue, absolute value revenue in the same number? So if you can just talk through that. And third, if you can, a lot of discussion around active client. You spoke about, April first half, maybe not really having all the digital process in place, but and even 65% or so coming from ICICI and getting traction in, non-ICICI Bank channel. So I think that should be a pretty decent set off. Even then, in terms of the numbers that I'm seeing, it's not, in terms of overall active clients additions or even NSE active clients, that doesn't seem to be a pretty, aggressive traction there. It's kind of lower than what you saw in Q3. So I understand there could be some element of that, but the pool itself is expanded. So just trying to think through what is the reason that this is happening.
Yeah. So I'll go one by one. You've given broadly 3 areas to talk about. The first is COVID provision. COVID provision we have not utilized. It continues to remain in our balance sheet. So it is very much unchanged from the last quarter, and we have not had the need to utilize any of that. We will keep reviewing it based on the movements in the market. We just felt it would be all right to keep it right now, given the uncertainty. And as things become clearer, there could be a release of some of that provision there. Your second question was on employee cost. See, your employee cost has to be viewed in the context of the fact that last year, actually, we in many ways cut back very heavily on employee variable costs of the employee, right? So to some extent, we have, in a way, provided, assuming that we are going to be having a certain trajectory of revenue, etc. If that revenue, etc., does not play out, there will be a pullback. Obviously, we will not be permitted to, to account for that kind of payout. That is something that will give us the flexibility to handle the employee cost as we move forward in the year forward. Our guidance is not at a unit every element of cost. Our guidance is more at an aggregate level. So please see us at an aggregate level. We have shown an improvement. We have given you a direction, so monitor us there on that number. Give us the flexibility to manage costs within the heads individually. It's important there, but to know that there are enough elements of flexibility in our cost which allows us to play out without necessarily the cost disappearing entirely. But we can expand or contract the cost based on performance, and that gives us the flexibility to manage our OPEX as well. The third point was with respect to...
Sorry, just before the third question, if I can just clarify one thing. You spoke about investment in, the employee base and, communication there, and obviously we have seen, improvement on the other OPEX line item, and other expenses also has a one-off. But, we were trying to rationalize rents, we were trying to rationalize branches, we were also looking at, employees which, rationalize some count there. At what pace have we kind of reached there? Because that can be itself a pretty good delta, and has that already played out? Because, we see the employee count down, but obviously employee expense up. So that is the thought process behind the expense question per se.
Yeah.
So, indeed, all the big... So our approach is twofold. One is that try to tackle the fixed elements of expenses which tend to be stickier. So that is something the going process. You mentioned 2 of the levers. So our employee count has come down consistently. Our number of branches have come down, so the rent expenses and the fixed cost expenses have indeed come down. We have also worked on, as I mentioned as a reply to earlier question, on some of the variable expenses where we have renegotiated transaction charges. etc. Those are also the initiatives that are there. So that is one lever that try and work on the stickier portion of the cost base, which is fixed. Second is try and variabilize a lot of costs. So, for example, when we are talking about sourcing and we are trying to kind of have a growth in business partner channel, one is strategically it expands the distribution network, but it also gives us a more variable manner of getting revenue. So, some of those initiatives are also there. So, one, variabilize. Second, look at the fixed cost, and all those elements have shown a decline. We are looking at discretionary expenses for this year, for example, in a COVID-related environment, things like travel, etc. What are things that we can look at? So those are some of the areas. So that has been our approach.
Okay. And the third one, sorry.
Yeah. So coming to the sourcing, although we did address this issue, it looks like there is still probably a little bit of a gap in understanding. So let me just elaborate it with great degree of granularity once and for all. So before COVID happened, we never had a digital process of account opening. There was always a physical leg. So when COVID happened and lockdown happened, account sourcing became zero. The only way account sourcing could commence is that we had to digitize everything. So starting from a process where we did not have a full digital process, which required regulatory approvals, development of the system, testing of the system, and then launching of the product. All that was done from 25th of March till about 20th or 18th or so, somewhere around mid of April. Obviously, when we came from a situation of no account sourcing to an ability to source account and then launching it, and it was all done in such a large velocity, we landed up with a situation where there were certain teething issues. Those teething issues are getting sorted out, and they have significantly improved from where they were, beginning of this quarter. And the account opening started. So whatever account opening you saw as 80,000 accounts that we opened, effectively is an outcome of about 2.5 months or less than 2.5 months of work. Point number one. Point number two, account sourcing was happening in a manner which was largely from ICICI Bank in the previous quarters, right? That was predominantly the source of accounts for us. We also said that we want to not only grow the accounts from ICICI, but also want to add newer channels. And we said that the newer channels are broadly the digital channel, and we said the partner network channel, which is getting augmented, right? So, and the idea is to make each channel pretty large in its own right. That's our medium-term objective. That strategy is very much intact. Now, because of COVID, when we look at ICICI Bank sourcing got, where does ICICI Bank sourcing happen? It happens from two methods. One is go and cross-sell to an existing ICICI Bank customer and increase penetration to stock clients. And two is the new client acquisition which the bank is doing. We cross-fertilize broking accounts to those customers. Now, in the lockdown situation, the second channel is completely shut down, right, in the bank. Please understand that. In such a context, you're actually largely cross-selling. So as things are now gradually, so what you have seen are some of the legs which were there in a normal unlocked situation now out of service right now. As they return to service, they will all spring back into action. Despite that, we have seen this kind of an output that you have seen, with our June run rates actually exceeding our last year's run rate. So I completely agree with you that the output is disappointing. Even I am disappointed. But we clearly see that we have to work very hard and spring back to higher growth numbers of quality without letting go on quality. We have experienced excruciating challenges in doing what we have done. Trust me. And we will continue to put our efforts behind it to show growth and momentum. And to do that growth and momentum, we believe we have a sense of what are the levers that are there on disposal with us. We will take them in a very measured manner so that we do not land up, making errors in implementation. So you'll have to trust us with our approach on sourcing with these words.
Sure. And last short one, if I can just squeeze in, if you don't mind. I just wanted to check if, you spoke about gross flows on the wealth side, you spoke about some redemption aspects there, even on the mutual fund side. If you can just talk through in terms of, if you just had to, because there is an M2M impact even on the AUM, on the wealth side and overall. Net flows, was it negative? Was it positive for you? Just a broad number will be helpful in terms of positive or negative, and how was it during the quarter, or was it trend? Talk about.
Yeah. So Anupam will just step in.
Yeah, hi. On the wealth side, so obviously, as you are aware that, start of the quarter, we had the issue of Franklin Templeton, and, people were averse to credit, and that saw some bit of outflow from debt fund per se. But on an overall basis, as the quarter went ahead, we saw a fair bit of, money flowing into the fixed income portfolio. And when I say fixed income, it essentially includes, the GI bonds, the gold bonds that came in, both tax-free and taxable, your perks, etc. So the entire fixed income basket saw a fair bit of, net inflow that came in. And also we saw that on the equity MS, we were able to, be in line with the market or slightly ahead of it. And on an overall basis, we were, net positive on the overall flow. And from a mark-to-market perspective, YOY, we were broadly at par. And on sequential basis, obviously, because the market ran up, so we had almost a 20% jump on the overall AUM. So that's broadly the story on the AUM and the website.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for answering all my questions. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Manish Sonthalia from Motilal Oswal AMC. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity and congratulations for a great set of numbers. I had just a very broad question. I mean, on the broking side, you all are doing exceptionally well, thanks to a very strong brand name, and even on the wealth management side, distribution of products is perfectly good and it's expanding. I just want to understand what stops you from launching a PMS product under your own company. Is it to do with a conflict with the AMC? Because I believe that, PMS is broadly an HNI product, and the large pool of HNI client base that you have, if you launch it under your platform, manage it yourself, given that you yourself have an ICICI Direct research, you have an ISEC institutional research, what stops you from launching a PMS license? Because it's a huge operating leverage business, particularly on the equity side. So any thoughts on this side would be helpful.
Hi Manish, this is Anupam here. On the PMS bit, we, as you're aware, we have a license both on the discretionary and the non-discretionary bit. And in fact, we have already launched 2 PMSs from ISEC, and we have raised in excess of 100 crores already. The distribution has largely been done by the wealth team in-house at ISEC, and hence may not, be known in the market per se. But what we want to do with the PMS license and is essentially to curate bespoke solutions for our clients. So I'll briefly tell you, what our strategy is. So one is obviously there is a big market on passive funds, and I think there we are collaborating with 1 or 2 models in the market, and one of it that we already have raised 100 crore is an index fund. So that is already in shape. The other big strategy that we have is on the NDPMS side, given as you mentioned, we have in-house research, etc. Because we have a large pool of demat assets, we have a dealing setup, and we have fund management expertise as well. And I think NDPMS we've already launched, and we are seeing, because that's a big need in the market where, clients want a consultative approach to portfolio building. It's just that in PMS, given that, sales per se still not is completely digital, and hence because of COVID, we've really not been able to go the full hog. But I think as we progress into the next quarter, I think you will see a good traction there as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Kunal Shah from Carnelian Asset Management. Please go ahead.
Just two part of the questions, while most questions have been answered. My question was more on the distribution part. While equity has been doing fantastic and the new product introduction has been doing good, my question is more on the mutual fund AUM and the client addition per se that is happening over there. If you could throw some light, because from last 4 or 5 quarters, our AUM has been, more or less stagnant. I'm not talking about the income because of the regulations, that is understood, but more on the part of AUM, which is obviously a function of market movement, but inflows as well. If you could throw some light, what are the barriers we are facing there when it comes to client addition? And the second part of the question is, in the annual report, I happened to read that we have for the lending products, we have tied up with partners like HFC, SDFC, BOP, PNB, HFC, Tata Capital for home loans and more. So if you could throw some light how this is working and how this can pan out, going ahead when it comes to augmenting our income from, other than the broking part.
Yeah, hi. This is Kedar here. This quarter, we saw a bottoming out of our MF client base. In fact, we grew the number of unique clients investing in MF. We are yet to see the trend bottoming out in the SIP base though. We hope it will be visible this quarter. So the overall SIP value went up, but the number of unique clients doing SIP actually went down. The number of MF investing clients also went up, and our market share in the equity mutual fund also went up compared to the last quarter. So we are now clearly seeing that the trajectory is moving up. We are also taking steps like launching a dedicated investment app so that clients can start investing in mutual funds, etc. as a starting point. So a lot of steps are planned also to focus on areas where we are relatively less strong. So we should see the changes happening on that front. For the loan business, the idea is to capitalize on our own client franchise plus our distribution network of brokers, sub-brokers, etc. So the idea was to complete the offering by tying up with multiple partners. It's at an early stage. Our core franchise and core loan distribution will be ICICI Bank loans. But wherever the client's file doesn't get cleared through the banking risk credit policies, these partnerships will come handy. Early days, but we are seeing a good traction, especially in the non-metro cities where our sub-broker platform is bringing in fairly large amount of leads once the loan business is opened up after the lockdown of COVID. So it is getting scaled up. All these tie-ups also help us in engaging clients because many of these cases, when they are rejected by the bank, the efforts are going nowhere. So we just thought these tie-ups will help us. It's scaling up.
Just trying to understand the bigger thought process out there is to kind of build a platform kind of a business where you are probably going to have various loan product policies out there for non-ICICI customers as well, which can be bought. Or just trying to understand the thought process other than providing options to existing ICICI customers. Is there more to it?
So existing clients is obviously the franchise, and plus through our distribution channel, this also brings a client to the ICICI family. It can be through a loan product. The journey can begin, and that's fine because our distribution, the sub-broker platform now gets the entire suite of loan offerings apart from insurance and broking and distribution products like MF, fixed income, etc. So we become a fairly robust and powerful franchise to tie up with for all the sub-broker franchise.
No, the eventual thinking is to have a network digital network connecting end customer eventually to us, to banks to begin with, and over time maybe make it open architecture.
Okay. Great. And just one clarity purpose point on slide number 14, we have got this clients with 2 or more products data being shared, right? So just wanting to understand, when we say 2 or more products, it is like equity, MF kind of, or what exactly we mean when we say 2 or more products?
One product is equity, second product is MF, and then there is a slew of products like insurance, loans, PMS, fixed income.
So we have created certain categories of similar kind of products. So for example, an insurance family, LI or a general insurance or a health insurance is one family, one product. Mutual fund is one family. Equity, any kind of a direct equity, direct participation is one family. So that is what we try to monitor and kind of try to scale up. So it is not each product type, but product category, which is a different need segment of a customer. So you can engage in a different manner.
Okay, yes. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Ritika Dua from Elara Capital. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity and congrats on a great set of numbers. A lot of questions have been answered, just maybe still 2-3 left. Firstly, sir, on this number which we shared last quarter on the percentage of contribution of prime customer base to the total revenue on the broking side, could we share how that number has moved this quarter? It was a 30-40 number last quarter.
So contribution from prime has been rising significantly, quarter on quarter. So this quarter also was no different. So I can say around 50% of our total business is coming only from prime plan now.
Okay. And so on a similar lines, I just wanted to understand, because of this new customer addition, which obviously the industry has seen, any color on the, I don't know how to really put it, but any trend on the contribution of this newer, set of investors to maybe, can we say the balance 50 obviously will not be because you have your prepaid customers as well. So how significant are these newer customers who are coming on board?
So at ICICI Direct, we always had a mix of, a completely new customer to market as well as the experienced customers trading elsewhere in the market. And we witnessed a similar trend in Q1 also. So it is not that all the customers who are coming, are the first time investors. We have experienced in the past is a fair mix of both the categories. And even in Q1, among the new registration which we did, the prime registration remained very robust and we exceeded even the last quarter number. So that gives us a sense, in terms of the quality of customers which we are getting in.
And Ritika, just to add to what Vishal said, definitely the focus is on quality. That has been stated very clearly in our strategy. So, we've been able to maintain that level of quality across plans. So that has been the focus. It's not that with size, there is any dilution on that parameter. So as an approach.
So on this market share gain, which has been, a great number this quarter, across both the products, equity and FNO. I was just, so while you are gaining, I still wanted to put this question to you. So a competitor of yours who you recently reported numbers, they have lost market share, and I just wanted to know your views on that. So they say that, the increased, interest from the newer set of customers towards option trading probably is be one of the reasons that they think that they've been losing market share. So what's your general comment on that?
See, on market shares, at ICICI Direct, we look at two different aspects. One is the long-term aspect of gaining market share, and then second is the short-term, the tailwinds which we get from the market. So, I mean, since last 4 quarters, we have been very, very consistent in terms of adding granularity to the market share, adding more number of customers through offerings like Prime and Option 20. So that brought us, to a stage by Q4 end. And beginning Q1, because of the volatility in the market and the products were very much there in place, we got benefit of the tailwinds also. So, I mean, the short answer is that this has a combination of all the hard work, the proposition, the consistent approach of adding more and more customers.
Yeah, Ritika, if I can paraphrase what Vishal is saying, see, market share is an outcome of effort. You can't just like that target a market share, but you can certainly target a set of efforts that you are going to do, which will eventually lead to an increase in market share. And that's what we've been doing. And how are we doing this? We have been granularizing the market opportunity. We are segmenting, sub-segmenting, and identifying different categories of customers which appeal to different categories of opportunities, and then trying to maximize our flow of customers into each of these baskets and buckets. You do that, and when you allow the opportunity to take over from the, having enabled the customer, market share is a consequence of that. So what we continue to do is continue to do that. Because, we have mature customers, we have been able to attract millennials. If you look at from 2017, 18, 19, 20, 70% of our total customer acquisition is below the age group of 30. So we have a full spectrum of customers. We have age profile well split. You have a diversification there. We have older customers. We have younger customers who are engaging. So quality pay focus if you do, and you give him a good experience, be sensitive to his needs. We believe market share will be a consequence of that. I think that's the way we think about it.
Sure, sir. So just on regulation bit, which obviously you've answered, just wanted to check, if I'm not mistaken, the circular doesn't really mention about the brokers really funding the margin which the customer has to bring up front. So firstly, am I correct that there could be a possibility? And also what we are getting to understand is that SEBI might not allow you to borrow it to fund it. You have to fund it through your balance sheet. Is there any clarity on there? And secondly, on the circular, while it came in December and maybe will be implemented maybe whenever December again. So it came in December 19, it will be implemented in December 20. But we were already asked by the regulator to start putting the margins in place since January already. So, all in all, what do you really, so firstly, on the borrowing bit, if you can clarify if there's any clarity from the regulator, and secondly, would it be really much be of a hassle, or we are almost settled there? Because we were probably already doing it since January.
No, so I mean, since January till this point of time, there was actually a lot of deliberations happened between the brokers and the regulators and the exchanges in terms of modus operandi, how to implement this, right? And there, you received this circular day for yesterday, which says that now this is the final shape of the new regulation, and which is, going to be implemented in a phased manner starting December 1st, right? So, last 6 months, a lot of discussions, a lot of things, getting highlighted by regulators, but in terms of implementation, our sense is that it will start from December 1st. Now, as far as borrowings are concerned, the new regulation says it very clearly that if you are taking a position for X customer, then the X customer only should fund the entire margin. If you are taking for Y, the Y customer should bring the entire funds. There cannot be any component of assisting him in terms of adding to his margin requirement or anything of that sort. So I think that is pretty much clear in the circular. This is the intermediate period, the transition period, starting December next 3 quarters, that customer may bring 25% of what is required, and the remaining 75% can be added by the intermediaries. But eventually, it will become 100% customer.
Thank you. We take the last question from the line of Adesh Mehta from Motilal Oswal AMC. Please go ahead.
Hello, sir. I just had two questions. So firstly, I see that your yield improvement has been quite significant on the broking side. How much of that is because of, price hikes you have taken, and how much of that is because of, the mix change between F&O and cash? That is question number one. The second question is, in terms of ARPU, what can be the difference in terms of ARPU between your prime customers and your non-prime customers?
Adesh, to answer the first question, yield improvement is primarily getting driven by product mix. We have seen, as we discussed in one of the questions earlier also, we have seen that the mix of delivery equity customers that on a relative basis went up. Derivatives in this particular period have been relatively lesser in terms of growth. So mix is driving yield improvement largely. Coming to your second question of ARPU on prime, non-prime, we have not put out that level of granular data. Having said that, we have seen that the prime proposition where the yield, the way you would calculate, I mean, yield on a product basis, is lower. But we have not seen that ARPUs are lower. So in general, and I'm talking in general terms, our experience is that the volumes are relatively higher because these customers are the ones who are quality customers and they are interested in equity transactions and investing, etc. So with them, they bring the volume as well. And that is where Vijay also mentioned that we are not too focused on a product level yield, a product level profitability, because derivatives could be at a fraction of a yield of an equity, but the ARPUs could be higher. So we look at the ARPU and how do you maximize the wallet share. That is what we are trying to do.
Right. So, sir, with the number of prime customers increasing, how should we think about ARPU? Will they actually, come down, or will they actually remain stable on a like-to-like basis? I'm not, how do you budget for your ARPU?
So, Adesh, I guess some of these things would emerge maybe in a couple of quarters, and I'll tell you why I'm saying. Because there are 2 or 3 moving factors over here. One is what you rightly said, adoption of prime. So we are still growing in terms of number of prime subscribers. Obviously, going forward, it can keep coming down because existing base already has adopted to whatever extent they wanted. So incrementally, the growth rate may come down. So that is one lever. The second lever is the product mix, which could be very, very contextual. For example, currently, there is a lot of equity participation and derivatives is relatively slow. Tomorrow, the mix can change with the intraday circular. So the intraday mix also would be one factor. Third, of course, our initiatives on growing the allied revenue, because what we have been able to do, or what we are trying to do, is to build up allied sources of revenue which may not be directly linked to the stock prices and brokerage rate. So how we are able to grow, what is the kind of scale, or where does it settle? So some of these things, it's too dynamic an environment right now. But the way we are thinking about it is that if we get the input parameters right, if we get the quality of customers that are coming in right, if we are able to engage our customers and they become interested in a DIY manner, I mean, then we will be able to, we'll try to maximize that opportunity. What that opportunity market offers could have some external dependencies, but our approach is to maximize the opportunity and to increase the client base of quality. I mean, these are the 2 things that maybe you could measure and judge upon.
Got it, sir. Wish you all the best for your future.
Thanks, Adesh.
Thank you.
Thank you. We take one last question from the line of Deepak Katwani from Girik Capital. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thanks for taking my question. Sir, will it be possible for you to disclose the revenue breakup in terms of cash and F&O or cash and derivative?
Deepak, we have not put out that revenue. In terms of volume, we have provided the volume share. where we said that it is broadly in line with the market, but we have given the numbers also. Our revenue share is something that we will not put out.
No problem. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was the last question for today. I would now like to hand the conference back to the management for their closing comments.
Sir.
Yeah. So thank you very much for giving us a very patient hearing and all the support that you've been giving us. Really appreciate the kind of interest you're showing. We will continue to take the feedback and inputs that we receive from you from time to time, and we do hope we are able to live up to your expectations. Please do take care, and the environment is indeed what it is today, and be safe, all of you and your families. Thank you very much once again, and have a wonderful evening and days forward.
Thank you. On behalf of ICICI Securities Limited, we conclude today's conference. Thank you all for joining. You may now disconnect your lines.